Welcome to the Measure Success podcast, where I talk with top leaders about effective strategies that inspire success. Really excited to have our podcast be the fourth ranked strategic planning podcast. Thank you so much for everyone's interest in being voted towards that. Also, really excited about our 40 strategy workshop that we are now up and live and going, and we're meeting with only 40 business owners at a time, and they get the chance to not only hear keynote speaking, but also meeting with them on a personal basis. If you want to learn more about that, go to 40strategy.com. Really excited to have a guest today because, of course, everyone's talking about AI, but it seems like very few actually know how to use it in a profitable investment type way. Eli Portnoy is the co-founder and CEO of BackEngine.ai. This is a company that's focusing on the AI part and the sales side for B2B sales. You should love this conversation. And this is not your ordinary individual. He has actually also had two other startups that he's had successful exits, which is not easy. Sense 360 and Think Near. He has a BA from Penn, MBA from Harvard. Eli, welcome to the Measure Success podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
You bet. So let's just start out with this big doubt that exists, right? Of this reminds me, and I remember the dot-com bubble. And I literally was working with a company called, I can now say who it is because they're defunct, smartage.com. And they were literally just spending a ton of VC money. They're based in San Francisco, and they were spending a crazy amount of ads, and they literally had no business model. They were just spending a bunch of VC money, and it went nowhere. Company went bankrupt, after the bubble, and that nice account went away, for us in terms of how we were selling to them. And I believe the same thing's happening right now again. I think there's a lot of waste on AI. Not to say that there isn't a lot of benefit, but there's a lot of waste. People are investing and they don't know where to go. So tell us a good story where your new company is giving what I'd call real insights and real value that didn't exist beforehand.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a huge disconnect between the hype and what's actually happening on the ground. And it reminds me of a story that happened maybe 2-3 months ago. I was posting on LinkedIn a whole bunch about how I was using AI and how great it was for me. And I had a really close friend reach out to me and tell me that basically he was getting a lot of pressure from his board to use AI in the business. And the board was basically saying, hey, I'm seeing all of my other portfolio companies and all this stuff on the news of like how, they're being so much more efficient and they're able to do so much more. Like, what's your strategy? And the guy didn't have one. And so he was calling me to see if I could help him. And so I actually met with him and we sat down in front of my computer and I asked him to show me like, are you doing anything? And he's like, some things on ChatGPT, but it's all generic junk and it doesn't help me. And my team doesn't find it useful. So we're like, we've tried, we've got a pro subscription to ChatGPT and we bought a couple of other tools, but it's not really helping us. So I asked him to actually show me what he was doing. And so he said, okay, well, like sometimes I need to produce like a one pager. And so I'm going on ChatGPT and I'm telling it, hey, build me a one pager on how we're different from this other company. And he showed me the results and it was generic junk. And it's obvious why it was generic junk. ChatGPT didn't really know much about his business, didn't know much about the competitor. And whatever it was able to pull was just based on the web, which was really superficial and didn't actually dive into how he wants to talk about his business and the framing and the messaging and all of that stuff. And it was just generic. It didn't look good. And so I kind of looked at him and I said, when was the last time you hired someone? And he said, 3 months ago. And I said, okay. And what did that process look like when you hired them? And he said, well, we brought in this person and we had him basically shadow a couple of people for about 2 weeks. And then we had them go through like a formal onboarding process and we trained them. I was like, and how long did it take for this person to actually deliver value for you? It was like probably 3 to 4 months before they were really starting to get in the groove. I'm like, okay. And was this person smart? Yeah, super smart. Well, why do you feel like this person who's super smart needed 3 to 4 months to get ramped up before they could produce valuable output? And yet you're going to ChatGPT and expecting it to produce valuable output on day one where you're giving it almost no information and you're basically giving it a very high level task. Of course, it's not going to work. And I think this gets to the fundamental issue with AI. It's not that it's not smart. It's not that it's not able to reason and produce incredible good outputs. The issue is that most people are asking it to do things without training it, without giving it context, without giving it information. They're expecting this really smart hire to go do a whole bunch of stuff and not putting in the work they need to. And I think that's the fundamental flaw. I think that's why people are getting so tripped up, because they're going in and in their personal life, they're basically saying something like, write me a song or do this or write me an email. And it's like really good at that because it's a really smart reasoning agent. And then they try it in the business context and it's so devoid of context that it's not able to do anything meaningful. And I think that's the piece that people are really missing.
It's interesting. I got reached out by a New York media firm, and they've worked with some of the biggest well-known people out there, like Grant Cardone as an example. Like they work with some of the big known players, and they're working with me on improving my branding, which is great, because it's fantastic. We're excited about it. We're continuing to expand. And of course, as we're going through this dialogue, we're going to talk about ideas. I didn't like everything. And so I, of course, sent back some of this, what I call a ChatGPT, and we use it a lot. So we're not like a little, like it knows me, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like we put a lot of content. We're using it daily and regularly. But I gave it back to this well-known firm, and the frustration on the other side was, he was saying, it doesn't know you, and it doesn't necessarily know how to change people's hearts. Right? Based on his intuition of the last 30 years, right? Of working with people and understanding that emotion is different, which is ultimately how you get people to buy. It's not through facts, it's not through data, but it's ultimately emotion is what gets people to make a decision. And he's like, you're not doing a good job of this, and you need to get better at this and stop thinking ChatGPT is going to solve that problem. And it's scary, right? Because I know people who are building out their entire marketing effort on ChatGPT, and they're still missing the point, right? They're still not connecting and an understanding, because there's still what I call some level of human experience is better than a regurgitation of some belief of what you are. So let's progress into the conversation I'm really excited about, which is this massive transformation of going to market. It's crazy. Now, share with me, because you've had these two other startups, how much, just if you don't mind, for those who are listening, just how much things have changed in the last 10 years. Give you a couple examples of that, and then where we're at today.
It's changed so much. So my first company was in 2011, and I have this like vivid recollection. I was talking to our COO, David Tannenbaum, and we were trying to figure out how are we going to get meetings. We weren't known in the industry. We didn't have a Rolodex. We were basically building a new technology and trying to bring it to a market that we didn't know. And I remember he basically spent a bunch of time trying to figure out how to get people's emails, how to like build sequences, how to get them delivered. And it was all completely manual. There were no tools, like really no tools. And it took a while, but once he figured it out and he hacked something together, the response rate was amazing. We were getting meetings right and left. Like we never had an issue getting meetings because email wasn't a saturated channel, the tooling wasn't there. And so if you could figure out how to send it, you would get, and you had a message that resonated, you would get a ton of meetings. My second startup was, we started in 2014 and we operated it like we were independent until 2020. And we were basically, when we first started, we thought we were going to use the same playbook. And immediately I was like struck by, wow, there are a bunch of tools now that make this much easier. And we can now find emails really quickly. And we can also now sort of create these sequences and we can just go. And whatever we gained in speed of executing, we lost in response rates. Like it was still effective, but it wasn't nearly as effective. And what used to take 1 or 2 emails now was taking 7 or 8 emails. And like what used to be a very generic email now needed to be super personalized. And so it was harder, but it was still a channel. And the way we offset some of that degradation was we started to move on to LinkedIn, and we started to use LinkedIn, and we found that to be a pretty good channel. Everything was hard, everything was manual, but response rates were pretty good, and that tended to work for us. Fast forward to today, both channels are, in my opinion, almost completely dead. It has become so easy to buy an email list and create a whole sophisticated, personalized, AI-driven sequence that people have just tuned it out completely, completely, completely. I know there are companies out there that are having some success with it. We haven't yet, and most of the people I've talked to haven't yet. And I think it's just a really, really tough channel. Same thing with LinkedIn. Like now all of those email automation tools, once they had automated them, they said, okay, well now let's automate LinkedIn. So now it's super easy to build these very sophisticated sequences that automatically are connecting with people and triggering stuff. And but the channel doesn't work anymore. And so the big question for me, and I think a lot of people are asking this, is if you're building a go-to-market and you don't have a brand and you don't have inbound, how do you reach out to the market to tell them about what you're doing and how do you generate meetings? And my sense is that whatever the answer is, and we've got some hypotheses, we're testing some stuff out, we're having some success, some not success. But whatever the answer is, it's not going to be easy because as soon as anything go to market is easy, it stops being effective because everyone else does it. And so we're really thinking about what are some of the creative, non-obvious things that we can be doing. And I think that's the fun of startups. It's like you constantly figuring it out. It's almost like as soon as something gets figured out, it no longer works. You've got to go figure out the next thing. And so you're constantly reinventing things.
I loved it that you went there, which is if it's easy, then it's not going to work. Or it's like you, once again, your success rate. Maybe you were happy in the past of getting 1% response rates. Now it's going to be 0.1% response rates, right? Or something of that nature from the old channels. And new is how can you creatively connect with people, like you. So it's interesting. We have our podcast here. You got onto our podcast. Just yesterday alone, we had about 6, 7 applications just yesterday to be on the podcast. That didn't happen. Well, first of all, we've grown and become more popular. That's one thing. But there's another part around this. It's become easier because I get these emails. Hey, Carl, I just listened to your podcast from such and such. No, you didn't. It was a ChatGPT pulled together where they pulled our old databases, which is easy to do. They had it crafted. Now we've got this. Ellie's going to be great to be on the show today. Now we go through our own analysis and we do evaluation, and we now are getting down to I think we're getting closer to 20% of the people we actually accept to come on the show these days because of the combination of being popular and the combination of we need to be more selective. We only have 52 slots a year, to get people onto this. So it's really fascinating, right? That change just in that one example alone, right? And so just because it's easy to send a billion emails, just half joking there. It doesn't mean it's measurable. It doesn't mean it's effective. So, and the other part behind this is trust has just gone out the window, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The level of trust we were talking about is my calendar. It keeps on getting this invoice off of Bitcoin has to be paid. At the moment, I'm not buying Bitcoin. Okay, folks. And why would I have an invoice of $58.67 that needs to be reconciled? It's complete spam. Knowing what you know now and what you're seeing and experiencing, I'm curious about some of these hypotheses that you had that maybe you don't want to disclose it, but people, of course, won't do it. What are you doing today or trying to change towards that you think is going to have more relevance to get leads, to get clients?
Yeah. So I'll share like a quick anecdote, which is I started my career at Amazon. And one of the things that struck me about Amazon is that it wasn't just like an incredible product or an incredible idea. Every bit of the way that company operated was intentional and thoughtful and reimagined. From the way you had like one-on-ones with your team to how you recruited to the way you ran operations to like the management structure, everything was thoughtful and what's it called and just intentional. And I think that's the key to building a great startup, and it's a key to building a great go to market motion where you've got to examine where you are in the world today and where you fit in and try to figure out what are the things that have broken that you need to intentionally fix. So we just talked about email as a channel being broken, LinkedIn as a channel being broken, trust being eroded. So that means that we're experimenting with a bunch of other channels. Like how do you reach out to people in a way that isn't less noisy? How do you do it in a trust-based way? And how do you do it in a way where like you're getting to a relevance that matters? And so the type of stuff that we're focused on are things like there's a company called Draftboard. What they do is they basically map out your LinkedIn, not so that you can go spam everyone, but so that you can find how are you actually connected to different people and what are your paths so that you can actually reach out to that last person through those different paths. To me, that makes a lot of sense. Like I may not answer a cold outreach on LinkedIn, but if a friend reaches out, I will reach. There's trust there. It's coming to me through a channel that they're probably privy to that I'm not. And like that to me makes sense. I think you hit it on the head. It's all trust based and it's all trying to find I guess it's authentically trustful channels that you can go to. And so those are the types of things that we're thinking about. And we're trying to be going back to the Amazon anecdote, really intentional about how we set these things up and how we structure them and how we experiment. And the other thing I'd say is, like, right now, this stuff is hard. Draftboard is making it easier, which is the right time to be getting into that type of channel. But it still takes a while, and it still means reaching out to people that you know, and it still means building a network and all of that stuff. As soon as it fully becomes easy, like we said, it probably won't be quite as effective. So this is the time to be getting in.
So let's talk about your tool, what you're building. I was really excited to have you come on because, first of all, once again, I just love the transformation of AI and what I call practical use of AI. It's scaling so rapidly, so fast. It's hard to keep up, right? It's impossible for us to keep up. I like to try to say you just hopefully can stay on top of the wave, right? And not get tsunamied over, right? And then all of a sudden no longer be relevant because you're not found. So what are you all doing with your technology to help that B2B sales process?
Yeah, I'll tell you the story because I think the story helps explain what it is that we do. So our story is when we first started the company, the first hypothesis was, hey, companies get a ton of interactions. B2B companies talk to their customers a lot. They're constantly talking to them. They have sales teams, customer success teams, account management teams, all these different teams that talk to those customers. And yet, most of that information that those customers are sharing, which is gold about what's working, what's not working, where there are opportunities for improvement, like, it doesn't usually cycle back through to the rest of the organization. It usually stays with the person who heard it because there isn't really a great feedback mechanism in most companies. And we thought with AI and large language models and our ability to actually parse lots and lots of emails and calls and transcripts and all this stuff, we can actually take that information and feed it to the people that need to see it so that the company is constantly operating at a higher level. What we found was that in order for us to do that well, we needed to both really understand AI and how to process all of this information. But the best way to do that was, going back to our very first comment, to add context. If we tried to get an LLM to look at a transcript and understand what mattered, what didn't matter without any context, it failed. It just couldn't do a good job. But the more context we added about what the company does and what the product does and what its customer does and what's worked before, like, the more context we added, the more we were able to actually derive gold from these different interactions. And what we started to find was that the magic bullet across all of AI is context. And as we started to realize that, we started to come to the realization that by pulling in all of these customer interactions and feeding context to it, we were actually creating another layer of context. Basically, a layer of context that understands your customers, your competitors, your playbooks, what works, what doesn't work. And so we started to take all of that and basically build this sort of like chatbot, think ChatGPT, but specifically built for sales teams because it has all of the context, so that instead of going into ChatGPT and saying something like, hey, help me build that one pager, you can go into our version, BackEngine, and you can say that. And now it's able to cross-reference all of the times that you and your team have talked about that competitor with customers and how customers responded and what they liked and what they didn't like and what worked and what didn't. And it's actually able to build you a one pager that works. And so we've gone from like feedback for the sake of feedback to feedback as a contextual layer on top of all these other contextual layers that we've built. And the net result is a ChatGPT like solution that works incredibly well for sales teams because it's smart. It's able to get those salespeople the things that they need so that they can close the deals really fast and really efficiently and really effectively.
You hit on one of the key things, of course, I'm sure you do and what you do. We're big fans of Gary Vee, not necessarily as Andrew Dice Clay talking, but he is smart, right? He's in this, he's in the business, he does it, transforming what has been an old industry, right? If you may think of think of the old days, right? You'd do an ad in the Super Bowl and you'd win, right? Remember GoDaddy.com years ago, and they put a bunch of people on there. It's like, oh, they win, just based on something like that. Well, today on YouTube or on TikTok, God forbid, you put something on and all of a sudden you become this instantly without any following. You could become known very quickly, right? Just because of the content. And then if the AI hops on top of that, you are on this podcast for a reason. This is increasing your content. This is not an accident, right? That you're on this podcast. You're not just doing this for fun. You're doing this to actually help get your awareness out there for companies, small companies, mid-sized companies. Frankly, a lot of large companies are barely doing anything. How, on this content side, what type of wisdom and guidance are you helping them with? Of like, you've got to do more. What are you saying to them?
Yeah, for small businesses, the practical piece of advice I give is go on ChatGPT. There is a tool in ChatGPT or in Claude or in Gemini called Projects where you can basically feed the LLM context and do a few things. First, just like write up a document on what your business does, write up a document on like what service you offer, write up a little bit of a document around how you talk yourself, write up a little document that outlines like how you like to like your voice and your tone and your style. Put that all into a project and then use that instead of ChatGPT. When a customer emails you, ask that for help. When you need help coming up with like new copy for an ad, use that. You'll see it will actually help you a ton. AI is really powerful. It is that reasoning agent. And so if you're an SMB and you can afford the $20 a month to get like a pro subscription to one of these LLMs, do it and put in the context and put in the work. It'll take you a few hours, but you will be so happy you did because it will make you and all of your team faster and better. And that's just like a super easy way to start getting value from LLMs. Before you buy any tools, before you do anything else, start there.
Yeah, I think that's a great starting point. I think that's fantastic. Of talking about there's such low hanging fruit out there, right? Of that we can take advantage of today. And then, so once you have that low hanging fruit, once again, how do you deploy it? How do you really get it out there? Because content's great. Well, I guess one of the big things we've talked about several times in the show is, this, right? When you do a search today, where do you go?
Yeah, I'm more and more going to ChatGPT for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're doing Google AdWords, how helpful is that going to be, right? If people are going on to ChatGPT is searching from content, right? If it's searching from content, the value around that at the end of the day is that you will be found more likely from content. When I can always tell I have a legitimate guess because information comes up when I pull up your bio from ChatGPT or Perplexity or a different tool like that. If you're not showing up, folks, on these tools, you are not producing enough content, right? I mean, you have to, that's the key. It has to be found on published information like podcasts and documents and YouTube or whatever it might be. You need to be found around it. People get scared to do this stuff, especially small business people. I feel there's a survival if they don't. What things do you say other than what you just said is, hey, there's some low hanging fruit to help give people the confidence to do things?
Yeah, I mean, so I definitely agree with you, but I think of ChatGPT as almost any major technological shift. The people who adopt it will have to take some pain figuring it out, but once they do, they will get a huge amount of benefits, and the ones that don't will not. I remember you talked about Google search in 2003, 2004. It was such easy pickings to go and like build a bunch of ad campaigns and like generate traffic. And there were all sorts of people who made a huge amount of money because they jumped on that quickly and figured it out. Same thing with the mobile device, all the apps that came out early, they just a ton of money was there to be made. I think AI is a whole other, and it's not just about building AI tools, it's just leveraging it to run your business more efficiently. But like every other tool that came before it, you have to put in the work, you have to put in the effort, you have to learn and understand it and figure out what it's good at, what it's not bad. What I get very frustrated by are people who basically try it once or twice, get something generic out of it, and like, this is dumb, and then leave it because then they're really missing out on a transformational opportunity. I met with a friend of mine. He runs a local business here in Los Angeles, and we spent 3 hours, and I just like went through how to use it and what the opportunities were, and at the end of it, he was able to basically offset an entire marketing hire because of ChatGPT. And he had tried, he had spent some time, but like you have to make the investment. You have to, and the investment isn't money, it's time and learning it. And it's like, I think of it like Excel. Like when Excel came out, like it's not the most intuitive, easy thing to use, but the businesses and the analysts that learned how to use it were 100 times faster than people doing it like by hand. And it's the same thing with ChatGPT. Again, if you have Excel, it's not going to immediately change your business unless you learn how to use it and you figure out what the right use cases are and where it can actually impact your business. But once you do, it's game changing. Same thing with AI. So just play with it. That's it. It just comes down to playing with it, and don't discard it all that quickly because you don't get a good response or it hallucinates. Like that's silly in my opinion.
Yeah, consistency is king. And producing regularly, right? You want to go through with it. And you're right. It does take a little bit of time. This is not something you should be fully outsourcing. You should be personally invested as a business owner to figure these things out or be right next to the person who's doing it if you're afraid to press the buttons, right? Like you should be watching and observing and seeing it, even if you personally don't have the cahoots, so to speak, what I mean, to like get in there and get after it. But it's like, hey, you need to get after this. So anyways, I'm excited. This has been a great I hate the point of where we are, where we have to actually start wrapping some questions up, but here we are. How are you measuring success with your clients today?
Yeah, so there's a few different things. So the first is, because we are an AI product, we spend a lot of time trying to get them to almost like change management, like figure out how to use this and deploy it into their workflow. And so we look at usage very, very heavily. And we're trying to get to a place where our customers are using the tool multiple times every single day. And that's number one. Number two is, because we were built on the backs of being a feedback tool, we're automatically collecting a huge amount of feedback on what our customers are saying. And so we as a collective team are consistently seeing all of the different interactions that our team has with customers. And when we see that they bring up a use case that they loved, or they find a tremendous amount of value, or it saved them time, or it helped them with a customer, like that's all stuff that we celebrate. But even more importantly is the stuff they tell us is not working. Every use case that they tried that didn't work, every time that they did something and didn't try to use it in our tool, like we're looking at that. And then obviously, like, we look at renewals and we look at a bunch of other stuff that helps us, articulate that they're happy. But those are primarily the two things. It's the feedback that we're generating ourselves, and it's the usage and getting it to be a consistent part of their daily work.
So I know you know how to work hard if you're in your third VC founder type event, but it's hard work, right? It's hard work,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of stress, and you've got other people's money that are looking for a return, right? There's stress around that. But it's exciting too, right? When you get to these outcomes. I love it multiple times. You've said this concept, we talk about it as well. You've got a hypothesis, right? Which implies that you haven't quite figured it out yet. But every business should be looking at what they're doing as a hypothesis, not to be true until it's validated, right? And then you pour all your money in, right? Once you know something's working and it continues to revalidate itself. So let's go to you on the personal side. What type of habits are you doing to maintain the energy to do your third startup?
It's a great question. I didn't know if I would have the energy to do the third one. And actually, after the second one, I was actively trying to steer myself away from doing it again. But there is this gravitational pull, because I feel like we live in this very unprecedented moment in history where a few people in a room with a bit of technology can really make big things happen. I think back to like my dad and my grandfather, like they spent the decades building a business, like decades and decades and decades. And it just takes so much time. And now, like, we really have like so much infrastructure around us that it's possible. And I find that to be incredibly exciting. But I think the second piece that is even more energizing to me is what you said about the hypothesis. In a startup, you know nothing. And if you want to be intentional about everything you do, which is what I learned from Amazon, you have to treat absolutely everything as a hypothesis. And even once you figure it out, you still need to have the humility to recognize that it's still a hypothesis, because you're still a really young company and things are changing so fast. And you have to constantly be reevaluating. Does this still make sense for us? Like, it might have worked for us when we were three people and $100,000 of revenue. Is that still the right thing now that we're 10 people and $1 million and 100 people and $50 million? Like, these are all things that you have to constantly be. And to me, I find that just incredibly energizing. So what do? I try to stay very, very humble throughout the entire experience, knowing that I know nothing. And I try to play with the stuff that's coming out and stay really curious about all of it. And if I can stay humble and curious, I think those are the recipes for at least giving yourself a shot in the startup world.
I love that. I just love it. I mean, humble and curious. That is such a refreshing way, right, to run a business as successful as. I think it's why you have been successful in the past, and you'll continue to be successful in this. I think the hardest part is when I run into somebody who said, "I've got it figured out," right? And I love you because it's just. And what I'm most concerned about today for the small business owner is they might, just for argument's sake, they might have a successful HVAC company in a local jurisdiction. They're like, hey, we own this. But what they don't realize is there's a PE that's rolling up HVAC companies that's coming to a town near you. And what you don't know is their content creation is going to all of a sudden make you won't be found on Google Ads anymore. And they will come into your town and they will take over your business. This is what's going to be happening at a crazy rate, even for those who think they have it figured out. And what's going to happen is you're going to end up becoming an employee of that company or go out of business, right? Unless when you try to hypothesize and fight this new battle, don't presume what got you here is going to get you there. And that's the biggest thing that freaks me out for small business who are saying, I'm fine, I've figured it out, I've been successful. It's the different game today, right? In every business, not just, technology businesses. It applies to every brick and mortar. It applies to every restaurant. It applies to every, you name it, right? It's legit. It's real. Okay. Moving on to one more part. I'm just kind of curious for you on a personal side. How do you measure success? I mean, this is a tough thing, right? When I love it. I said, I didn't know if I wanted to try another startup again, right? Or like be a light rail driver, do Uber just because like it's such a tough thing to do. How do you define personal success today?
I think there's a couple of things. So personal success to me definitely means, like, first and foremost, doing what I do professionally, but being a great father and a great husband. Like that to me, like trumps anything like on the business level. And throughout my career, I've had to make sacrifices, but that's just not a trade-off that with the perspective that I now have, I just don't feel like that's the right trade-off. And so if I can do both, that's the biggest personal success. The second piece is it's to build something that I'm proud of. And I feel like there's a lot of different ways that I could build something that I'm proud of. One could be the team and the product that we build and the type of culture and the organization. Like to me, those are the things that, because I feel like the return, the financial piece of it comes if you build something that you are proud of, and it's very, very hard to do it in the inverse way. And so that's been a little bit of a change of focus. I think with my first time, especially, it was just about the financial outcome. And what I ended up doing is building a company that got sold very quickly, but didn't have all of the infrastructure in place to really become a great business. And I feel like the inverse is you build something that you're proud of and that, like, you take pride in. And if you do that, then you can build a really great business on the right foundations and it can turn into something really, really large, which is, I guess, my aspiration this time.
Yeah, that's good. Really, really good insights. How could people, okay, just one book. Sorry, we're really tight here. One book that you recommend to our audience that they need to read today.
So I'm reading a book that I'm just fascinated by now. It's called The Delusions of Crowds. And basically what it does is it's looking historically at all of these different periods in time where a huge number of people all believe something that was clearly a delusion. And so it goes into a lot of the like economic bubbles. It goes to a bunch of times in history where like people thought the world was ending and different like religious episodes. And it explores like, why do these things happen? Like, what is it about how we as humans are wired that lead us to basically follow each other into a delusion that in retrospect seems obviously incorrect. And I'm finding it incredibly interesting, incredibly fascinating, especially in the climate that we live in today. And so highly recommend it. Very thought provoking.
Yeah, this is sort of like Pokemon cards, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, folks, this is a bubble. I'm sorry. Anybody who's involved in this right now, we've seen this play out before. Good for you, or everyone's going to make money in it right now. But this house of cards will fall, pun intended, as well. And it's just what happens, right? There's these delusions, right? That something's worth something, and people turn things to a business, but there is no inherent value in a card
Yeah,
other
no,
than the
it's
belief
easy
that
to
it's
get
worth something.
wrapped up. Exactly. And you have so many examples of it, like the tulip mania and the dot-com bubble and like all these things where like we all just believe something that in retrospect was pretty easy to see wasn't it. But yeah, it's worth reading. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean you can't make money in the process. It's just there's also a lot of losers that you don't read about as much, and the same things happen here, in crypto, right? With all the minor crypto things, right? There's a lot of games going on, and hallelujah, I know there's a lot of people who've made great money in this stuff. I know people who never work again a day again in their life through this process. But there's also the reality of it's a delusion, right? So for some of it, it's not. It's real for a moment until it's not, right? And then you go through that, and so all right. Finally, how can people connect to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So best place is to just reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest, but you can also email us. We've got our contact information on our website, BackEngine.ai, and my email is eli@BackEngine.ai. You can just reach out to me there.
Like, thank you so much for connecting today. This has been a really fun conversation. I hate it that we actually have to end this because I could have continued to talk with you probably through the rest of today and afternoon. Thank you so much for being a guest on Meshes Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. It was great to talk to you, Craig. Carl.
All right, to everyone who's listening, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. This is the type of stuff you need to be listening to. I have my whiteboard next year. I think I didn't fill, but I wrote a lot of concepts and thoughts just that came from it. This is why I love to do podcasts. Is I love to learn from the great people who are on the forefront of what's happening today and will be happening in the future. Thank you so much, Ellie, for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And to everyone who's listening, we're wishing you the very best at measuring your success. Have a great day.